All right, we're rolling. John Cass on the RBTZTV Radio Network. George Washington III is our guest this morning, and I've known George for quite a while. He has a lot of talents. He's an opera singer. He's a voiceover artist. You've heard him on everything from Harris Teeter to McDonald's commercials to Root Sports and everything in between. And George is an interesting guy because I feel like a lot of us have thought in our life like voiceovers would be something really cool to get into. And we hear people and we say, God, how do they get into that? And what do they do exactly? And how does it pay a lot? And just everything you can possibly imagine. So the best way to answer those questions is to get someone on who actually does it. And George, that person is you. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me.
George, what got you into voiceover?
So when I moved to Charlotte, I was working for what was then First Union, and we were doing videos, internal videos that I was hosting. I'd been asked by a funny story about that. George Washington got on an elevator with Elizabeth Taylor at the bank, and she asked, "Do you want to host videos for us?" I said, "Sure." And so we started doing these internal videos, and at one point, I had to go down to Concentrix Music and Sound Design, which used to be in South End, and they asked to narrate some things that we were going to do with that video. And while I was there, I'm like, wow, I like this. This would be cool. I would like to be able to do more of this. And I asked them, what do I do? And they said, well, you bring us scripts and we'll make your demos for you. And that was in 2003. And I went and I looked up scripts and I practiced and I did all that, and I went back and made my demos and then started passing them around to the local studios and then to other places, and been working on that ever since. So it's a long road. And when you talk about people getting started in voiceover, that's one of the things I think a lot of people just don't comprehend, that it takes a long time. And you and I, through our relationship and where we've worked together, it's one of the things that we try and get across to the students we work with, and not just in voiceover. If you're going to be working in media, do not expect immediate success, because it isn't possible to be immediately successful.
That's so true. I sat in one of your classes recently, and I heard you say something, and I thought, God, that is so profound and surprising. You don't have to have a, quote, good voice to be a good voiceover artist. Tell me what that means.
Well, the thing is, as you said, a lot of people will say, people tell me I have a great voice, I have a nice voice, I have a voice for radio, and I should be doing voiceover. Well, the fact is, if you listen to commercials, listen on radio and television and everything, the vast majority of those voices are speaking in a conversational tone. There are times where you're going to have people do announcer things, but they're specific places where that happens. But most of the time, they're looking for people to have conversational voices. And a lot of people have conversational voices. Many people could do that. Not everybody can. So it is not a factor of having the voice like, when I make fun of it, of the announcer voice, I talk about Gary Owen, who used to be the voice of Space Ghost, talking like this, with a hand on the ear, that kind of thing. You know why they used to do that? Their microphones were terrible. They used to do that because the microphones didn't pick up everything. And that's why announcers all sounded like that in the 40s and 50s. I remember,
and the amplitude of the receiver, right?
Yes.
Yep. They would have to say something like this, and they'd have to say it very pronounced. If they didn't do that, no one knew what it meant. And then over time, even if the amplitude got better, people thought, well, that guy's just talking. He's not really a voiceover guy. So he would have the tendency to talk like this also.
Yep. And that's the thing, is there's this assumption that it's got to sound like this kind of voice, right? Well, that's not even the voice I get to use on a lot of work I do. That's affected. That doesn't sound like me having a conversation with somebody. Mm-hmm. If you think back in the 2000s, there was the gentleman who was found by the side of the road, the man with the golden voice in Cleveland.
Good Morning America.
Yeah. He had an outstanding voice, an outstanding radio voice. Guy pulls up, says, read this for me. And he does this, and he sounds exactly like this. That's the problem. I can do that. A whole lot of people can do that. Can he do a conversational read? And in that moment, he couldn't. He hadn't had training. He had been a 70s DJ. Wow. And he had, all kinds of other issues, which I know people who have tried to help him. Joe Cipriano and some folks tried to help him later, because he was he had a lot going on. He had been in drugs and alcohol and relapsed immediately after that because he had so much attention paid to him out of nowhere. You know, he was homeless. Now Quicken Loans Arena was going to give him a job and all those things. I've heard him on one commercial since then, and it was for Kraft macaroni and cheese. And
it's ironic. He's homeless and he's still eating Kraft macaroni and cheese.
And there's a lot of, I mean, he has, you know, clearly he had the potential to be something, but I will tell you as a coach, working with people who come from radio, on-air radio personalities, they're some of the hardest people to get to be able to be good voice actors.
Because they're just so used to what they do.
Yeah. And it's because so much of what they've done is built to time, right? And so they're working in the ramp, right? So you're working in the ramp in and out of songs. And so it's quite fast. It is built around whatever their radio personality is and not their speaking. And so getting that broken out of their habit is a hard thing to do. That happens with lawyers. It happens with teachers. It happens with anybody who has a public speaking gig, because you have established this is how I speak in public and I will just transfer it to my read. But that doesn't work because nobody wants to hear you read that way. They want to hear you in a one-on-one conversation with them as they listen to you on the radio or on television.
That's funny. I've also heard you say a variation of, you know, you're not talking to radio land out there. You're not talking to a million. You are talking to a million people possibly, but you're really talking to one person, and that's the person listening to it in their car. And it's hard to get used to that.
Exactly. And, we've had students who have gone on to be on radio, and I've heard them do voiceover demos afterwards without coaching. And if they're doing it without coaching, they are using their radio voice. And that might work for when you leave your studio and you go in to do the ones for the station, but it's not going to work if you're going to go into a public setting or go into the competitive world of what we do as voice actors.
So the hardest part of you've told me this before, the hardest part of your job isn't voice acting. What is it?
It's continuing to find work.
Yeah.
This is a freelance small business, and everybody's freelance small business has the same goal: continue to get work. And your job becomes auditioning and marketing and networking and all the things that are necessary to keep having something coming in. Now, I have friends who are wildly successful, who are doing things on network television and cable television and all over the world in that kind of way. But all of them started small. They all had to start somewhere and weren't able to just walk in and, oh, this is great. So what people find is there is so much other stuff going on that when people talk to me about getting into voiceover, many times they will walk away going, I can't, because that's too much. For instance, auditioning. What you do as a voice actor is you'll have signed up, either you're signed onto a service or you have agents or things like that. You will get auditions. You will go through them, analyze them, give them a couple reads, edit it up, send it off, and then you better forget about it because you aren't going to win it. That sounds like a terrible thing to say, but the fact is when things are going great, you are winning 2% of your auditions.
Wow.
2. So 2 in 100, and that's when things are great.
Boy, that's very much like a sales job. I used to ask students, one of our classes that we both teach at CSB Media Arts Center. And one of the questions I ask students when we teach the sales classes, how many of you guys have come to school here because you want to be in sales? And 0 hands go up, not a single person. And then my second question is, how many of you guys want to start your own business in this industry? And everybody's hand goes up. And I have to tell them to be in business is to be in sales. And that's something that's hard for people to grasp. And I think when I hear you and I hear you do these commercials, and maybe we can hear a few, edit them in. My immediate thought is, I remember you getting the audition and voicing and doing God knows how many other ones, and know how hard it is to get them. But I think the person listening goes, God, that guy got so lucky. He's lucky to have a good voice. He's lucky to have a good client. He's lucky to have representation. Let's talk about representation. You didn't always have representation. What happened?
So what happened is initially I started out just talking to the studios and production houses that I knew. But for some people, not all voice actors do this, but I did. I reached out to voiceover agents and submitted my demos to them, and they can decide to take me on or not. And over the years, I've taken on representation in Texas, in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, that area of the Midwest, in Denver and Toronto. And I don't have representation either in Los Angeles or New York. That's actually another step up. Yeah. So that takes some more effort, and still working in that direction. I also have representation in Portland, Seattle.
Nice. Do you ever do political commercials?
Yes, I do.
Would you ever do a political commercial of something you didn't believe in, or someone you didn't believe in?
I actually, it is a thing I specifically said I won't do. After doing one and going through the process of recording that and being directed in something that I really disagreed with, and I decided that I wouldn't do that anymore.
How about a product or service you didn't agree with? Not something crazy one side, but something marginally, like maybe a product is not really that good of a product.
I struggle with that sometimes. The situation is, people will say somebody's going to get paid for that. You might as well get paid. But I also have to live with it afterwards. I know I did it. To be on a this is a very low level, right? I sometimes do phone messaging. I work for a company that sends me phone messages to do for companies up and down the East Coast. And occasionally I will get ones for gun stores. And I do them, but every time I do them, I don't feel great about it. That's just me. There are a lot of people who do them and are just fine with them. But there are some things that I end up drawing the line on, and I feel okay drawing that line.
When we first started working together, and I saw your webpage, African American Voice Talent, in my mind, I thought, God, you're just really narrowing yourself down. But it became extremely successful to you. Do you recommend people be micro-focused like that? Or I know a person as well that has a really good children's voice, and she does a lot of children's type commercials and cartoons, but that's her sort of specialty. To me, you're a lot more broad than that, and yet this seems to really work for you.
Well, there's a reason for that, and it's because of search engine optimization. When people are looking for particular voices, your website has to reflect what they're looking for. I'm actually in the middle of a rebuild, and so probably in the next month or two, the website will be rebuilt by someone, not me. The one that was there, I built myself. But it helps because people are going to search for Black voice actor, African-American voice actor. And the higher you rank in search engine optimization, the more likely they're going to see you when they search for you and hopefully come up on the first page. So it's important to brand yourself and to know what people are looking for. And if you are going to be the target of a search, that your website reflects that the search terms that they'll be looking for.
I read somewhere that one of the search terms people look for is people who sound like Morgan Freeman, which made me think, and I know you've heard this before, at least for me, that you sound like the Arby's guy.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Ving Rhames.
Thank you. And have you ever put in those keywords to say, if you're looking for someone like that and quite can't afford to pay the $500,000, maybe you can get someone like me?
I have not done that, but one marketing collective that I'm in, we do that where we set up pages specifically for, if you're looking for someone like this, and they do that search term. So we have some celebrity sound-alikes. In voiceover, a lot of the time, we'll get an audition and it has a reference where it'll say like Morgan Freeman or somebody like that, Dennis Haysbert. And you use those primarily to get the feeling of what that person sounds like, unless they are specifically asking for, we need a Morgan Freeman sound-alike. And there are plenty of people who can do that, but for the most part, when people are looking for a Morgan Freeman type, they don't specifically want somebody doing and we're old enough to remember Rich Little, yep. Right? Nobody's asking for a Rich Little style of impersonator. doing those kind of things. What they want is someone who reflects that feeling, right? And if you think about the feeling that Morgan Freeman generates with his voice, there's authority, there is warmth, there is familiarity, and there's depth and power. And so if you can reflect those things, those feelings and emotions that get from you, that'll be enough in most cases.
Boy, it sounds like it really helps to have some kind of a theater or acting background, doesn't it?
It does help. I've found when I'm working with people that people coming from music backgrounds and people coming from acting backgrounds do better. Now, the thing with acting backgrounds is if they are used to being stage actors, we've got to work them out of the size of emotion that they express and out of projection. Because now you're not working on a stage, you're working behind a microphone. This is the job. This is the thing that does your amplification. But on the plus side, for people who have done music and have done theater, they've been directed already. They know what to do when somebody tells them to do something that isn't, say, be higher or lower. When it's saying, hey, can you do a little more of this? We've had direction, sound taller. What do you do to sound taller? Well, to sound taller, I can do this. I can sound taller if I do this. Who knows what that means? We do, because we've heard that as musicians. We've heard ways of being told to put more feeling into it. And that's what our job is as voice actors, is to reflect the emotion in that moment. Live in that moment that you're reading that copy and reflect the emotion that you want the listeners to have.
Sometimes people say, man, that guy's got some natural talent. And author Malcolm Gladwell says, anybody can have natural talent if they have 10,000 hours of practice. How much truth is there to people who just sort of get it almost immediately versus, and I know you said earlier in the conversation that it takes years and years. Does it take years and years because you need to get discovered, or does it take years and years for you to discover within you how to project yourself in a way that's wanted by the people that are hiring you?
Well, it's a combination of things. It takes years and years of repetition, right? Because you need to find out what works and what doesn't in your voice. It takes years of getting out there so that people will get to the point where they're hiring you without auditioning. It takes years and years for you to get used to doing the edits and getting them done in a manner that is fast and repetitive and get that stuff out there. It's a combination of things to make it work. Now, I will be perfectly honest. I had all of 6 hours of coaching before I started doing voiceover. And it's reflected in how long it takes to get where I need to be, where I wanted to be. People need coaching, period. I didn't get it, and it took longer for me to get where I wanted to go. People need to be told, here's what's the right thing, here's the wrong thing. Here's the feeling you're supposed to do. Here's how you're supposed to present yourself. Get the direction from people who know how. One of my least favorite sayings is the people who can't do teach, and that's been around for decades and decades. The thing is, the people who teach have done it. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And so in our case, we want people to, I want people to get experience from the people who have been there, who know that these are the rights and wrongs and all that. You'll discover things that work for you, but with some guidance from someone else who has already been there. There is natural talent in a lot of things, right? In sports, there's natural physical ability. In acting, there's some natural talent. In music, there's some natural talent. But natural talent, most of the time, has to be honed by some repetition and direction in order for it to reach its full potential. I'm a basketball fan, and we think about guys who play basketball in parks in New York and all that, and look at how great basketball players are. And I will tell you, a tiny, tiny handful of those men could play in the NBA, and a vanishingly small number, because they don't get coached.
So being 6'6" is a starting point. That's the natural part. but honing it, coaching it, practicing since you were 7 years old. Do you know who Thurl Bailey is?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Played for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, he does. Did. Yeah, he's retired now. And he does. He's on the motivational circuit as well. And he was telling me that he said he was in 6th grade or 7th grade, and he tried out for the basketball team, and he was the tallest kid in his class, and he didn't make the team. The coach had something against him, and he was so upset. And the coach said, "No, he did not make the team. You're not going to make the team. So don't even try next year." And luckily for him, he had a different, next year, the coach had been gone. They brought in a different coach, and the different coach, the problem was the other people who did make the team, they just practice and practice and practice and thorough practice too. And he also grew half a foot, and he was 6 feet tall in 8th grade and he tried again, and he didn't make the team again because the other kids had practiced and played the whole year. He didn't, and he could have given up then, but he didn't. And then he came back in 9th grade. He was like 6'3", and he tried again. This time he made the team. And of course he went on to become a professional basketball player, but he just says, sometimes, the old phrase, it's hard to beat a guy who never quits. Right. Was it Yogi Berra who said that? Mm-hmm. And he said, you just don't quit. If this is something you want to do, you do it and you continue to do it. And that's what I see in you. I saw that in you even when you came to our school and had some talent already, you want to take it to that next level. And I saw you on Fox 46, doing traffic. And I knew that wasn't your goal to be a traffic guy, but it was a step and a step and a step and a step. So it's so nice to see you do what you do now. And I don't want to end the interview without asking a couple of questions for 2 things. First of all, you're going to be in an upcoming opera, right?
Yes. So funny, I'm doing something tonight in Troy, North Carolina. I was asked to sing in a role in a very small American opera called A Mall and the Night Visitors. It's for Christmas, but I'll also be in the Opera Carolina production of Porgy and Bess coming up in January, and I have a small role in that. And it'll be the second time I've been in that opera, and it'll be the second time I've been in opera with them since. So I sang with them for a number of years, and then I didn't for 10 years, and they've asked me to come back and be in things again, which is nice. When the kids aren't home, I can spend that time at rehearsal and the like.
What's your favorite opera song?
So it's hard to pick an individual thing that's my favorite piece from opera. I mean, there are people who like Nessun Dorma, which is from a Puccini opera called Turandot, and that's one that people would know if they heard it.
Right.
I am a baritone, so I don't get to sing things like that. That's tenor pieces. So there's things that I've picked out, that are in my repertoire and things like that. So there's one that when people ask me to sing, hey, you told me you sing opera, can you do something? There's a piece called Questo Amor from another Puccini opera called Edgar, and it's something that I can just kind of toss off and say, here, this is an operatic thing that you want to hear.
I'll put you on the spot. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, I can. See here. Questo amor, vergogna mia, io spezzar, scordar vorrei, ma d'un'orrida malia, sono schiavi sensi miei, 1000 volte al ciel giurai di fuggirla e a lei tornai, giurai di fuggirla e a lei tornai.
George, you are my most talented friend. That was amazing. I can ask you, what does that mean?
So in that particular opera, as many operas are, this guy is in love with someone else who doesn't see him at all. They've been friends since childhood, and he's basically saying, I love this woman and she does not see me at all.
Wow. So it's almost like a country song.
Yeah. I mean, hey,
think about it.
Man, so much music, the bulk of music's about love in one way or another.
Yeah, music and heartbreak. Wow. Mm-hmm. Very good. George, you're also a coach And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. You're welcome to give a shout out, because I know you do a great job, and you already have a lot of students who serve you. But how can, if someone's interested in just doing some voiceover work and maybe learning more about how they can hone their skills and get to know better, are you taking on new people?
Well, I work with a company. Is it okay that I talk about
sure,
that?
absolutely.
So I work with a company called Such a Voice, and they offer coaching packages where you get coaching, you get demos made, you get marketing help, you get additional support. And I take on students as students roll off from working with me. I'm a technique coach, so I work with them for either 8 or 16 lessons and sometimes more. And I often try to make sure that I can still continue to mentor them afterwards. So I people touch base with me once a quarter or whatever, just to see how's it going, what's happening. So if people are interested, they can check out suchavoice.com.
Excellent. George Washington III, I want to thank you for taking such time on such short notice, joining us. I want to thank you for singing. I want to thank you for enlightening and educating us, because I think if more people understood the dynamics of what you do and what maybe they want to do, that can certainly, as you said, persuade them to either move forward or say, this is definitely not my speed. And I appreciate having you as a friend, and I appreciate having you as a guest. And thank you for coming in today.
My pleasure.